Next step is to get the top end on, and then the motor will pretty much be done. The lifters have to be put in before you put the heads on. On an LS, we use these things called lifter buckets. Because these are the lifters. They're roller lifters, okay? Which means unlike just a solid lifter or just a non-roller lifter, the lifter can go down in the hole and it can spin and rotate. It doesn't really matter. Okay, but here, because of the roller, they have to remain oriented perpendicular to the cam. So the bottom of the lifter bucket, you can see these flats, and the lifter has flats. So you want to install these like that. So put a little oil on. And then put the lifters in there. Okay. So here's the lifters installed in the lifter bucket. I'm going to just put a little bit of oil on the roller. Okay. Now this fits down in. It only goes one way. Down in here. Wiggle it down. That. There's a retaining screw that goes in there. So all the lifter buckets are in and torqued down. Next step is to put the head on. Make sure you have your dowel pins here in your block. Here's the head gasket. Mine are labeled front. Okay, so I know that they have to go to the front. One thing to mention too is I took and cleaned the surface with brake clean and a lint-free towel. Really good. Okay. Put the gasket down. And I cleaned up the head also. Drop your head down on there. Line up the dowels. The stock head bolts for an LS are torque to yield bolts, which means that you can only use them once. So you tighten them down to a certain torque and then you turn them some more a certain degree and it actually stretches the bolts. What I've done is I've bought some aftermarket ARP bolts. So I just bought the ARPs, which you can reuse. So per ARP, they come with these washers. Okay. Here, there's a chamfer. You're supposed to put the washer on, dry, onto the head, and then use ARP Ultra Torque lubricant. You're supposed to lube the bottom of the head of the bolt. I will do that. And then the threads also. And then put those down in there. And basically hand tight them down. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and do all those. There's 10 of the larger, I think these are 8mm. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 more inside here. There's smaller ones that go on the back side of the head. Those are 8mm. I'm going to get them all set up and then we'll torque them down. It kind of needs to be torqued down in a series. So I've assembled the washers on these with the lube on the one side, just as they say. These are the smaller 8mm ones. Then just wind them all down snug. This is basically the instructions form is for the big 11mm bolts. You need to torque those down in 3 different steps, 25, 50, and 75 foot-pounds. And then the smaller 8mm ones, go back and do those to 25 foot-pounds after you tighten up the 11mm bolts. First stage is the 25 foot-pounds. You need to follow the torque sequence. Next stage is 50. Again, following the torque sequence. And the last step is to 75. foot-pounds. And again, follow your torque sequence. Okay, so all the larger 11mm bolts are tightened. Now you can go and work its way out. So these are just a 25 foot-pounds, one stage. Alright, so that heads on. Basically repeat on the other side. For the Valvetrain, we'll need the rocker stand, which is here. Push rods. These are my aftermarket push rods from Texas Speed. They're thicker metal. And then these are the new bolts to hold down the rockers that came with the trunnion kit. Then in here are the rockers. They've been soaking in oil for past couple weeks, as been recommended. First step is make sure you oil down the valve stems, since we're going to be cranking the engine over. The stand doesn't really locate, so what I'm going to do is just put a couple of rockers in the bolt just to hold it in place while we work on setting these up. Oops. There we go. So I'll put one on that end. Put one on this end. And we'll just tighten those in place. Snug them down. And we'll start with the cylinder on the end here. This is the number 2 cylinder. And I'm going to put some assembly lube on the bottom of the push rod. Okay. The one that goes down to the lifter. Drop those in there. You have to definitely locate these. Make sure you're on it, and then push down. It pushes those lifters down in the lifter bucket. Okay. So I'm going to be methodical about this. This is the exhaust valve. This is the intake valve for cylinder number 2. So what I want to do is make sure we got to be on the base circle to tighten down the rocker. So I'm going to rotate the engine over, push down on these push rods until I feel the intake, which is this one, start to come up. Then I know for a fact that the exhaust is on the base circle. So I'm going to turn. Okay, and I feel the intake coming up. Okay, so I know that this one here is on the base circle. So take the lifter for the number 2 exhaust. I'm going to put some assembly lube just in the cup. Not much there. Okay. Now the lifter, you can see on the trunnion, there's one side's got like a recess for the bolt head. Make sure that's to the top. To lift her down, make sure that the end of the push rod is in the cup. Take your bolt. Put a little oil under the bolt head. Put that in there. Okay. Tighten that down. Again, make sure that your push rod is in the cup. Okay. And that gets torqued down to 25 foot-pounds. Alright, so now I'm going to turn the engine over until this exhaust valve starts to open, and then I know the intake is on the base circle. And again, you're going to want to push down on the push rods because those lifters kind of get hung up in the lifter buckets because it's a press fit. So I'm going to turn over the engine. The intake of the exhaust valve was just starting to open. You can see how that's pushed down on. That was because the lifter was stuck up. But now I know for a fact that I'm on the base circle here. the same thing. So basically, I'll go down through all the cylinders and do it the same way. So both heads are on, the valve train's in.